Conrad,
That's me.
good to see you or hear you. Are you gonna, can you put your camera on?
I tried doing that and it says the host has stopped it.
Oh, that is so weird. Okay, wait, hold on. Hmm. Really know why that would, oh, hang on just a second. So it looks like people are coming in right now. Bio, do you wanna, Bio, can you show yourself?
Yeah, you should be able to hear me.
Yep, I can hear you. You're good. There you go.
So I can show my face on video.
Oh, I tried clicking the button again and it worked this time, so I don't know what changed.
It may change again.
I'm still unable to start the video. It says,
I got you, Bio.
all right.
Oh, sorry. Conrad, just check your chat real quick.
I don't see anything in the chat. Oh, I see this.
I accidentally did that, so I'm gonna turn this on the back end so you can, sorry, that was a mistake.
That's all right. I'm desperately clicking around in Zoom and trying to figure out how to do that.
Oh, go over to the right, yeah. On the right hand side, Bio, you should have it now. And we have 9 attendees, so why don't we just wait for everyone to kind of come in, and then we will, we will definitely be sending this out to attendees. You're seeing some questions come in, but we're just going to wait for everyone to get here, and then we'll turn it over to Bio and let us get started.
Thanks, Natalie.
Yep. Let's give people maybe like 1 more minute. We'll go ahead and get started. Let's see. All right.
It looks like we have 17 participants. Should we go on and get started? All right, awesome. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Bio. I'm a graduating senior from Princeton University's class of 2020. I majored in philosophy and I earned a certificate in entrepreneurship. I'm an analyst with Chaac Ventures, which is a seed and early stage fund focused on the Princeton ecosystem. A few of our early investments include Overtime, Paladin, Skyfront, and Suspect Technologies. I'm going to be your moderator today. We're going to begin with a story from Conrad from Superhuman, and then we're going to move into an Ask Me Anything, where Conrad will be answering questions that you submitted. But first, I want to send it over to Natalie from Boldstart Ventures, who we partnered with to make this event happen. Natalie, the floor is all yours.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Bio. We were really excited to partner with you all today for this event exclusively for Princeton students. So Boldstart's actually a first Chaac venture capital fund, and we are based in New York City. We invest in seed stage startups in enterprise software, and we are basically thematic investors right now, and we're very focused on the disruption of the IT infrastructure space and developer-first technologies as we continue to move from the legacy to cloud, monolithic to micro, and migrate to a more decentralized world. So we are day one partners with companies like Sneak and Customer, and of course, Superhuman. And we're excited again to be here today and to welcome one of our amazing founders, Conrad Irwin. And so Bio, I'll let you go ahead and take the floor.
Thanks, Natalie. Before we begin, we want to run a quick poll on our attendees regarding your interest in startups. So I'm going to launch the poll right now, and you'll be able to answer, and then we'll give you about 15 seconds and we'll go over the results. So 15 seconds. Yeah, I'm gonna wait for everyone to answer. All right. Results are still coming in. Still a few more people that haven't answered, so you can take some time to tell us about your interest. All right. It seems that we've got about half the respondents who would like to learn more about startups, and an even amount, about 20% each, of people who want to, who are currently working at a startup or who want to build a startup or are currently building a startup. And then we have a few respondents, about 8% each, who are hoping to find a startup when they graduate, and about the same amount who want to work for a startup when they graduate. So I guess that's 16% total there. I'm going to show you guys the results as well so you have them. All right, now I'm going to go into a short intro on Conrad, and then we'll move it over to the Ask Me Anything session. So Conrad Irwin, he's the technical chops behind two email-related startups, Raperative and Superhuman. Raperative's Gmail plugin inspired an entire ecosystem, scaled to millions of users, and was acquired by LinkedIn less than 20 months after launch. Irwin then co-founded Superhuman, which aims to be the fastest email system out there, with features like undo send, AI triaging, follow-up reminders, and scheduled messages. Outside of Superhuman, Irwin is an active open source contributor who has written code for Git, Firefox, and Wikipedia, and is on the core team of Pry, a popular tool among Ruby programmers. I'm going to hand it over to Conrad now to tell us a bit about his story.
Sure, thank you. I'm actually going to stand up so that I can wave my arms around. Cool. So I thought it would be interesting to talk through kind of a little bit of how I ended up doing what I'm doing, and maybe pull out some of the things that I've learned about, how to do things. And so kind of the question I'd like you to think about is, what do you do when you don't know what to do? So rewind in time a bit. I was in my final year at university at the end of May, and I had done nothing about finding a job yet. I had done 2 internships over the previous summers, both times working with a software consultant, Martin, on whatever projects he was working on at the time. And as part of the backstory, you should know that I met Martin because I used to sing in the choir with his girlfriend, odd as it may seem. So I had some work experience, but I hadn't started reaching out to companies, I hadn't started interviewing. It was beginning to reach a crisis point. I'd be graduating in 1 month, and I had done nothing. When, out of the blue, I get an email from Martin, this person I've been working with. Hey, Conrad. Some friends and I are starting a company and are looking for interns. Are you interested? I was definitely interested. More than that, I was really excited. I'd worked with him before over the summer twice, so I knew I enjoyed working with Martin. Also, he was based in Cambridge, which is where I went to university. And at the time I had a girlfriend, Sarah, who was going to be there for a year after I graduated. So I told Sarah about this, and she was also over the moon. This would be perfect. We get to continue living in the same place. But after a few emails back and forth with Martin, my excitement turned to sadness and a little bit of confusion. His new company was not going to be in Cambridge, UK. It wasn't even going to be close. It was going to be in San Francisco, in America. I didn't know what to do. I felt like I was stuck. Do I leave, go to San Francisco, leave Sarah? Do I stay? Do I disappoint Martin and then have to find a job? Neither option sounded good at all. So how could I resolve this? I sat and thought about it for hours and then days. I remember vividly one evening sitting in the corner of Sarah's room while she's working and Googling how to make life choices in an incognito window. I hadn't told her about the change in location yet. Google turned out to be useless. And so eventually I ended up asking people for advice. I asked my mom what she thought. I asked my dad what he thought. I asked some of my friends. And they all thought the same thing. You should go. You should go to San Francisco. But how do I broach the subject with Sarah? She still thought I was going to be there in Cambridge with her. I knew I had to tackle this problem head on. Asking for advice was working so far, and so I decided to invite her over for tea to ask for her advice too. So, Sarah, Martin's company is going to be in San Francisco. If I work there, we won't be in the same place next year. What do you think I should do? I was worried that she'd be really sad, or maybe she'd be mad at me. Maybe she'd cry, maybe she'd shout at me. But no, she was rational and helpful, and hopefully a little bit disappointed. She pointed out the obvious. It's just an internship. Go to San Francisco for a few months, and we can figure it out after that. After that, I felt a bit stupid. How could I have worked this up into such a big existential crisis? There was a really easy answer, but I couldn't have found it by myself. There was too much emotion in the way, too much not thinking straight. And so that company I joined was Reportive. Martin was one of the co-founders, along with Rahul, who was the CEO. I was originally the intern, then I became the first employee. We went through YC, and 18 months later, we were acquired into LinkedIn. And about a year and a half into my time at LinkedIn, I realized again it was time for a change. Instead of going home and continuing to work on my Reportive work in my free time, I started switching over to side projects as soon as I got home. And that for me was like a sign that this was maybe not what I was enjoying doing anymore. And so I started doing my first job search. I skipped it the last time. I started talking to people and reaching out. And I realized it was really hard to find something good, something with people who were good at what they did, working on something I was interested in working on. I didn't know what to do. Obviously, taking a cue from last time, I started asking people for advice. But who could I ask? I wasn't ready to let my manager know that I was looking for a new job. I didn't really have any friends who were software engineers except the people I worked with, and I was worried they'd tell my manager. But in hindsight, I shouldn't have worried. I ended up asking the other software engineer on the Reportive team for advice, and instead of giving me general advice, he just said, hey, 2 of my friends are starting another company. James and Simon are starting a developer tools company, and it's called Bugsnag, and they're looking for their first employee, someone to be the VP of engineering. And so I obviously ended up leaving LinkedIn and joining Bugsnag. Okay, so fast forward 2 more years, it's 2015. I have a great job at Bugsnag. I work at a company where I believe in what they do. I do good work, and I really enjoy working with the people there. They'd even helped me immigrate. They'd helped me get my green card. When Rahul, who had been the CEO at Reportive, reached out to me, he was looking to start another company, Superhuman, and was looking for someone to be the CTO. I was torn, again. I love the idea of being a CTO at a startup. I get to continue programming, which I love. I get to take responsibility for building the architecture of the code base, for hiring the software engineering team, for defining how we do work as software engineers. But I already had a job that I enjoyed, I was good at, that paid well with people I liked. I didn't know what to do. How do you make a decision like this? I started asking people for advice. I talked to everyone I could think of. I talked to the people who ran Bugsnag. They thought I should stay at Bugsnag. I talked to Rahul. He thought I should start Superhuman. I talked to Martin, and he offered me another job doing something with him. I talked to my parents, to my wife Molly, and a few other people I knew from work. And every single person gave me a completely different opinion. I still didn't know what to do. And I realized I was struggling because the decision I was trying to make was purely personal. What kind of job did I want? What responsibilities? What learning opportunities? Who to work with? How do you make a decision like this when everyone is telling you different things? One of the really big advantages of life in the real world is that there are no exams. There's no external criteria for what it means to be successful. For some people, for me at that time, it's also one of the biggest disadvantages. There's no one who can tell you how well you're doing or what you need to improve on to be better. The idea of better beyond a certain point isn't even well defined. It can be debilitating. It definitely was for me. But for some people, it's freeing. The idea of better isn't even well defined. That means you can choose the things that are important to you, and you should choose the things that are important to you. And so I sat and I thought about this. And for me, learning is important. I want to be learning new skills myself. Helping other people succeed at their goals is important. I love seeing people who are happy because they feel accomplished. And building tools is important because it gives people the things they need to be successful. And as soon as I'd realized this, the decision-making became really easy. I knew at Superhuman, I'd be able to learn faster. I'd be able to help more people succeed at their goals, and I'd be able to build more tools, more better tools. And so it's no surprise, to me at least, that I ended up leaving Bugsnag and starting Superhuman 5 years ago. And since then, we've been busy building the company. It's going through the startup journey. It's very fun. The first task, finding product market fit. Can we build a productivity tool? Can we build an email client that people love? The answer turns out to be, yes, we can. The next task is de-risking the business model. Will people pay for an email client? Will they pay enough to cover our costs? And are there enough of them to make it into a viable business? And again, through hard work, we figured out that the answers could be yes, yes, and yes. And so now we're at the next stage of building a company, which is to take these seeds, this product, this unit economic positive business model, and build them out into a company to be reckoned with. In the next year or so, we're focusing on expanding the email client. Right now it's Gmail only, but also to support Outlook. In the years after that, we'll be building more tools, more products. They aren't just email, but calendar and task management, relationship management. Anything that is building tools that helps people succeed at their goals is in scope, which is exciting. That's exactly what I want to be doing. So to tie all of this back together, what do you do when you don't know what to do? Firstly, ask for advice. Particularly ask the people who will be affected by your decisions, as scary as it is, because they will have the best insights. Secondly, stay connected with the people you know. The best opportunities are those that will let you spend time working with people you already know and like. And thirdly, know what's important to you. I value helping other people succeed at their goals. I value learning for myself, and I value building tools. And so being able to create a company like Superhuman is the best way to focus on doing those things with my life. Thank you.
Thank you, Conrad. That was a wonderful story. Very relatable. Yeah, definitely very relatable to, especially for me as a graduating senior. It sounds like it's been an exciting journey so far. So
Yes.
now we're going to jump into Ask Me Anything with questions from the audience. Now I'm going to say the name of the student. Please excuse me if I mispronounce your name. And as well, we're also going to have time for maybe around 10 questions. And then we'll, if there's more time at the end, we'll try and ask some more. So the first question is from Stephen Polson from the class of 2021. And they're asking you, why choose email as the most important productivity area to focus on? Are there plans to integrate Superhuman into a larger AI-focused productivity suite in the future?
Yeah, so 2 questions there. Let me kind of pick the first one. Why email is a question we get all the time. Some of it is from exactly what I just said. You know, we asked people for advice. We asked people, what slows you down at work? So ended up asking maybe 20 or 30 people that question. And the answer came back every single time. I spend too much time doing email. Email sucks. I don't like email. It was a very, very clear signal that we got from the people that would be our target audience. The other factor that went into it, obviously, we'd worked on Reportive. As I mentioned, Reportive was a plugin to Gmail that brought social information into Gmail. And so we already had some experience in designing products in the email space. And so the combination of those two made email the obvious place to start. And then to the second part of the question, absolutely. So for me, building productivity tools is what Superhuman is about. We want people to feel like they have superpowers. We want people to get to the end of their day and be like, wow, I had such a productive day today, every single day. And I think you can only do that by building a larger number of tools and also building them in such a way where as you use them more and more, you get better and better at using them. You also mentioned in the question AI. I think this is an interesting area. It's actually one of the things we mentioned on the website that we get the most complaints and queries about. We say Superhuman has AI-powered triage. And the question that we get time and time again is, how can I trust the AI? And so one of the things that we've kind of focused on for now, at least while AI is in its infancy, it's good at some things. I don't think it's good yet at helping humans with the decision making, is to really focus not on making the computer make the decision for you, but in really quickly giving you the context you need to make the decision. So if you want to like break it right down, you can think of humans as like decision makers and computers as the way of surfacing everything they need to make decisions quickly. And if you think about it that way, a lot of the product design choices that we've made at Superhuman will begin to make a lot of sense. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I think it definitely does. Thank you. That makes perfect sense. I think a natural follow-up to that is from Edward Tian from the class of 2022. And he asks about how Superhuman's model has changed over the last 3 months since the COVID crisis, but I'm also interested in hearing how it's changed over time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so day one, if you talked to me in May 2015, which is when we started the company, Superhuman was going to be freemium. We were going to give it away to as many people as possible and then upsell people to a paid version. That was the model we had at Reportive. And we realized after about 6 months of building the product, so we still weren't ready to have users yet, that if we went down that path, it would likely not work as a business. And we realized that because we looked around at the other email client startups and all of them were struggling with the second part of building a business model, which is, can you generate enough revenue to cover your costs? Email is a relatively expensive thing to build. And so instead of giving it away for free, we decided to instead focus on making it the best email client in the world and making sure that everyone was paying for using it. So that was about 6 months into starting the company. It's been relatively similar since then. We've obviously focused in around personal onboardings, making sure that we have a strong relationship with all of our customers. And then to answer the second question, I'm going to like broaden it out a little bit. I don't think the business model has particularly changed in the COVID times. We've obviously done some things that we feel are important. We give out Superhuman free for anyone who's involved with frontline COVID efforts. That seems like the minimum that we can do to help with that. But the business model is still very much the same. And one of the things I'm very fortunate about is that productivity tools is a market which is not shrinking. It's a market that, as boldstart believes, is growing very quickly. And so we haven't, like many companies, seen a big drop in our usage. We did see a drop in growth just as everyone was going into shelter in place, and I think everyone was just distracted. It's like, okay, life is too confusing to pick up new tools now. But since then, we're now back to record growth again, which is really nice to see. Yeah, that makes sense?
Yeah. The next question's from Elizabeth Petrov, and she's a user of Superhuman. She gave you a compliment. She said it's design on steroids. But she adds that anyone can make nice designs. So what are some of the technical advances that make Superhuman a truly revolutionary app?
Yeah. So one of the big changes that we made with Superhuman is kind of a change back to having a heavy client. So if you look at all of the web email services, Yahoo, Outlook, Gmail, they're all on the server and the client downloads emails on demand when you click. And that gives you a problem. So if you think about humans again and how they think, if you distract a human for like half a second, it's as much as distracting them for 30 seconds because they've had time for whatever's like, oh, I need to make dinner. Oh, I need to, like, all of those thoughts come crashing in. And so for us, the real technical change is to find a way to download all of your emails into the browser, into the client, and search them locally, and to really focus on making sure that you never hit that moment of distraction. And as a user, you'll also know, like, avoiding distraction is something we take very seriously in the UI. If you look at the Gmail UI, for example, you'll have the list of labels down the left with the chat bar, and then the emails, and then the toolbar along the top, and then the next toolbar down. If you look at Superhuman and you're looking at an email, you'll see the email. And then on the right, you'll see the sender. And that's it, because we don't want you to be distracted by things like that. And then kind of one thing that you said in your question that is maybe a point for me. I do agree everyone can make good designs. I think it's surprisingly rare for people to actually execute on good design intentionally, because it's something that's very expensive and it requires both massive time investment and also massive thought investment. Like, what is a good design is a hard question to answer. And so I do agree with you. In theory, anyone should be able to design good products, but I'm always surprised with the products I use today, how little that seems to be true. But hopefully we can change that.
Yeah, got it. And for this next question, it's from Theodore Marku from the class of 2020. And he says that while Superhuman boasts a high NPS, and for anyone who doesn't know what an NPS is, that's a Net Promoter Score. It measures customer experience and is a predictor of business growth. He says you're also being picky about the people you let on as early, your target users as early adopters. So how do you envision scaling past that selection of early adopters, especially in this current situation?
Yeah, we've actually, so let me just kind of tell you the story. We've kind of done most of that already. So how did we get our first users? It was obviously friends, investors, anyone that we could persuade to use this email client, we did. And then as we started to think about how we wanted to grow, the two things are important. One, that people would love the product. We wanted to make sure that everyone who used Superhuman had a great experience. And some of that is obviously around building the client and making it better, but some of that is being very selective about the kind of user that we wanted to add. And so very initially, we didn't have many features. We didn't have very much. What we wanted was people who had a high volume of email, but weren't particularly sophisticated about it. And so we went for people like founders and CEOs, people like investors, where their email volume is often too high for them to even get through all their email. And so they were just pleased that they could see more email out of the fire stream that they're getting. As we built more features out and we made the product better and better, we started being more open to who we were allowing in. So let's pick another vertical, business development. It's another very email heavy domain, but these are sophisticated email users. Their job relies on how well they do email. And so once we had features like being able to snooze and schedule and snippets, those people were able to be happy using Superhuman. And so kind of over time, as we fleshed out the email client, we've expanded and expanded and expanded until I would say probably 6 or 8 months ago, we essentially completely removed any filtering on function, on what you do as part of being allowed in. We do still have a waitlist though, and that's for the very simple reason that we don't support Outlook, we don't have an Android app. And so anyone who signs up, who uses Android primarily, or who uses Outlook gets put on the waitlist because they can't use Superhuman yet. But as we're actually working on the Android app already, it's a secret, but that's all right. And Outlook will be later this year. And so as we build those things, more and more people will get straight on board and fewer people will be added to the waitlist.
Sorry, I was on mute. Got it. Thank you for that, Conrad. These are great questions from the audience, by the way.
Yeah, they really are.
Yeah. And, you know, it's good to hear that you're going to be on Android soon. I'm excited to use it. So the next question is from Daniel Kim, who's from the class of 2021. And he asks, how did you arrive at the pricing model of $30 per month? Mm-hmm. He added a comment. He said, at first glance, it seems like the people Superhuman is targeting would naturally be willing to pay more. So I guess this leans off the last question as well in terms of, do you see that price as a barrier for new users?
Mm-hmm. Yes, pricing is a really complicated, really complicated area. So there's a couple of principles that went into the pricing of Superhuman. One of which is that too cheap is compared to free. So what Superhuman sells you is productivity, control, and time. We want you to feel like you're in control of your email. We want you to feel like you can get through your email quickly. We are not selling you a better email client for just a little bit more. Like, we want to position ourselves as a different kind of tool in the market. And so that ruled out price points like $5 a month or $8 a month. Because at that point, people are looking at that price and going, well, Gmail's free, Superhuman's $5. Like, so instead, we wanted to be positioned very differently. The way we came up with the actual number was to kind of disallow those small ones. And we then ran a pricing analysis called Van Westendorp analysis. It's a relatively common one. But you go to all of your existing users and potentially potential customers as well. And you ask them 4 questions. At what price would Superhuman be too cheap that I'd worry about its quality? At what point would Superhuman feel like a bargain? At what point would Superhuman be so expensive that I wouldn't pay? And at what point would Superhuman feel expensive, but I'd probably pay for it anyway? And then you ignore the first 3 questions and you just take that answer to the last question. And for us, it was fairly spread. It was between like $25 and $50, but we picked 30 as kind of a good compromise.
That makes sense. The next question's from Jasmine Singh from the class of 22. And Jasmine asked, what's the worst setback you had while working at Superhuman? And what got you through it?
So there's one personal setback. So the founding date of Superhuman is no accident at all. But as many of you may know, when you immigrate to America, you're probably on a visa like an H-1B or an F-1 where you have to have an employer. And so I was at Bugsnag and I was ready to start Superhuman, but I didn't have a green card yet. And so I could not do anything. And so that set the start of the company back by about 2.5 months while I was waiting for USCIS to figure that out and try and get that done. So that slowed us down a lot at the very beginning and felt very painful. In terms of the company growth beyond that, probably the biggest setback we've had has been around bad press. So about a year ago, we got into trouble with the press for allowing you to see when people open emails that you send through Superhuman. So similar to every marketing platform ever, we allow our users to embed a tracking pixel, and then we tell them if the tracking pixel is loaded from the internet. And that gives you an idea of did they open the email in their email client. There is a lot of debate in the world about whether this is fine or not fine. I think it probably is fine given how many apps use it and how useful the feature is. But it's definitely an arguable position. And so this is actually a blog post that just a random person on the internet wrote talking about how Superhuman was A, tracking that you'd opened the email, and B, also sharing the approximate location. So we used to show which state the email had been opened from using the IP address. That was not fun. It was actually, I was supposed to be off visiting my sister-in-law for the first time in her new house in Washington, DC, and we were like going around museums. And that whole trip, I was just on the phone, either to internal company meetings, trying to discuss what we should do, or to lawyers, or to people in the press, trying to just like make sense of the whole situation. And so what we ended up doing is we ended up listening to the criticism. So the criticism was, if I can see which state someone's in, that's something that they might not want me to know. Like, that's fair. And so what we ended up doing is taking the stance that whether or not a message has been read is useful and obviously key. Where it was read from is probably irrelevant in a modern world. And so we removed the location part of the feature. The reason I call that a setback, though, is that still today, I'm talking to security teams at large companies, and they go, oh, Superhuman, that's the one with the read tracking pixels that tracks locations and is evil. Which isn't true. It's just that's the message that they heard about. So that's probably the biggest setback.
Thank you, Conrad. And that makes sense. You know, I think for the students out there that are thinking of starting startups, hearing from someone who's in it and has gone through setbacks is a very important lesson. From here, we have Ken Oku from the class of 2021. And Ken says that they're interested to know more about how the startup scene is evolving and where it's at right now. So how have you stayed relevant in the startup scene? And you know, what do you think about our current environment?
Yeah, it's really interesting. So one of the things that happens if you start a company, particularly as a technical person, is that your role very quickly evolves from building the software to building the team. So I'm essentially a full-time kind of interviewer and recruiter at this point. And so in the very early days, it was really interesting because we didn't know what exactly we were building. We were very open to hiring people with all kinds of different backgrounds and skill sets, because they'd come in, they would apply their skill set to our problem, and then we'd build it in their way. As that has happened over the past 5 years, we now have a pretty good idea of how we're building things. We know what tech stack we're using on the back end and the front end and the iOS app. And so we're a little bit more selective about the kind of skills we look for. We still filter exactly the same on, personality. We want people who are optimistic. We want people who are proactive. We want people who are intentional about what they do. But we also now are looking for people who have some experience in Go or some experience in React, because realistically, they're going to have to come in and jump into a relatively large React or Go code base. So in terms of hiring as the startup grows, I think that's the biggest change that I've noticed. You go from hiring generalists who are happy and great and believe in your idea to more specialists, more professionals who've kind of done this a little bit before, or who have an idea of what they're doing there. And then there are a couple of other aspects of the question. So one of which was remote and COVID and how's that affecting things? And the other of which was how do we stay relevant in the startup community? Mm-hmm. I don't think I'm particularly qualified to talk to the relevance in the startup community piece. I think the things that we've done there have been mostly side effects of our marketing strategy. So we've stayed relevant in the startup community because we've been very hyped and marketed well. And a lot of that is down to Rahul. That's his kind of special superpower. In terms of COVID and the current situation, it's really interesting. Many people before this time were talking about how they really wanted to try a remote job. And we, for a very long time, have been flexible remote. We do expect people to be mostly in the office, but if you live an hour or so away, that's fine, just work from home. The Superhuman philosophy on this has always been, treat people like grown-ups. If this is the best way of getting your work done, do it that way. But that has to be coupled with the observation that for most people working on a team, a big part of the work is building a strong team. And so for us, because we've only ever done this in person, it's much easier to do in person. There are definitely successful companies who have figured out how to do that fully remotely. And a lot of companies that do things fully remotely also do kind of days together from time to time. And obviously those are on pause for the next couple of months, but I expect those to resume. So what does this permanently change for Superhuman? One of the biggest changes is interviewing people remotely. It's one of the key parts of interviewing, and this goes for both interviewers and interviewees, is generating a social connection. How do you make sure that both of you come away from the conversation being like, that was a great conversation, and they have the skills we were looking for? And that's the piece that's much harder to do over Zoom. So we actually extended pretty much all of our interview times by 5 to 10 minutes, just so that we could chat more. Of just like, hey, how's it going? There's a lot to process in the world right now. Like, how are things with you? And really generating that social connection intentionally. But we have hired people in the last month or so. They've been interviewed fully remote. They've started fully remote, and it works. It works just fine. We do a lot of documenting. Most of the stuff is written down somewhere so that people can be more self-serve. It's less easy to just tap people on the shoulder and see how they're going. I'm not sure if that was a perfect answer, but hopefully there was enough in there.
No, there's a lot of great info there. Thank you, Conrad. And, I think a lot of students as well might be interested in being a CTO one day. So I guess in a more normal environment, what are some of your day-to-day tasks as a CTO of a startup?
Yeah, I mean, that does change probably every 3 months. So for the first year, it's building the code base, building the architecture, deciding how to get things done. And so pretty much heads down. Very quickly, it becomes trying to find more people on the team. So there is a limit to how much one person can do in any endeavor. And particularly when you get into software engineering, the limit is very variable, but it's not particularly high, even for the people who are truly extraordinary. And so very quickly it became helping hire. Luckily with the initial hires, the technical background doesn't matter so much. It's really about, can we be friends? Are you interested in the same things we're interested in? And do you have just that figure it out attitude that we need? The other things that have come onto my plate in the most recent times have been analytics. So as you're beginning to build out a business, is it working? It's a surprisingly hard question to answer because you have random costs associated with each particular user interaction that you have. You have lots of coupons and subscriptions and renewals, and there's a whole bunch of data you need to gather across different systems. So we use Stripe for billing, like pull in Stripe data into a database so we can analyze it, pull in like, oh, and these are the random friends who are using the old system. Analyze all of that together, check that it's all actually working. And so for last year, a big focus of my time was really just like moving data around, making sure that we had the insights that we needed to check the assumption that our business model was unit economic positive. And then this year, the next kind of thing that's come up is security and compliance. So obviously we're an email client. Privacy is incredibly important to what we do, as is security. It would be a company ending event if someone were to hack into Superhuman. And so I've been working on SOC 2 and compliance like that. One of the interesting things about this is that really the only bucket that gets smaller is time spent programming. So it's first programming, then hiring, then managing, then analytics and compliance. And I'm still doing all of the managing and hiring, but the side projects are what takes up the rest of the time, not coding.
Awesome, that was an amazing answer. And for, I guess, the last question from the attendees before we start wrapping it up, what advice would you give to students who are interested in launching a company but might be on the fence right now?
I think the important thing is what I said, is like really know what's important to you, not in a specific way, but in a general and like touchy-feely way. So for me, one of the things that it took me a long time to realize this, but I genuinely enjoy making other people happy. Like there is nothing better than building something, giving it to someone and seeing the smile on their face for like, oh my goodness, this is going to save me time. And I don't think that's like, obviously that's a good thing, but I don't think that's necessarily what's important to everyone. All right. I don't think you go into a company like Airbnb because that's the feeling you want. You have a different thing. It's like, I love adventure. I love meeting people, like all of those things. And so if you know what you enjoy and you can think of a way of expressing that, companies are a great way of doing that because you get to focus in on the things that you're important and no one else can really tell you what to do. On the other hand, if you still feel debilitated, if you're still like, I don't know what to do yet, it's probably because you haven't yet figured out what's important to you. And so if you want to launch a company for the sake of launching a company, which, I mean, I shared that too. I kind of always wanted to be a CTO. That was like, you know, growing up, it's like, oh yeah, CTO, that's the thing for me. But I didn't jump into it immediately because I had that still, I talked about it a little bit, but that debilitating fear of like, I could do anything, like what? And so I spent a lot of time building side projects, and that was really good for like practicing coding and practicing the skills involved. But if you want to launch a company and you have an idea that you're excited about, you should just do it because the excitement will get you through a lot of the struggle, which is just, how do you figure things out? And the answer to that is you ask for advice or you ask Google. But you really need that like deep inner reserve of energy to get through.
Absolutely. I couldn't say that better myself. Certainly very relatable for me. At the end of the day, it comes down to that day-to-day making people happy. That feeling really can keep you going when, especially during those times when you feel like you have a setback. So thanks for sharing that, Conrad. You know, thank you to all our audience as well, all the Princeton students for joining this startup talk hosted by Chaac Ventures and Boldstart Ventures. Especially thank you to Conrad for taking the time today. I'm sure you have a very busy schedule. And just want to mention as well, Superhuman is currently hiring for engineers, and you can find their jobs at superhuman.com/jobs. So please, if you're looking for a summer opportunity, I definitely recommend Superhuman. Thank you so much, Conrad and Natalie, for helping make this happen. And have a great day, everyone.
Yeah, thanks for organizing and thanks for the excellent questions, everyone. It's great.
Absolutely. All right. Bye, everyone.